Hey, 7th grade, Mr. Herzberg here. Today is Monday, April 20th. We're in the fourth quarter still. And we're going to go ahead now and do a couple of things. First of all, it's Monday, which means Pigman. We're going to be reading some of the Pigman today. We're also going to go ahead and go over last Friday's homework questions. You've got a journal today and a new standard we're going to go over, so let's get started. Let's go over that journal first, shall we? This week, you are working on Standard Reading Informational Text 7.2. What does that mean? Central ideas is what that means. What's a central idea, you say? Well, a central idea is what the author has in mind when he or she sits down to write a piece of text. What they want you, the reader, to take away from it. They want you to understand something. Remember, there's three things an author wants to do: persuade, inform, and entertain. Most of these will be to inform because we're reading informational nonfiction texts. So we might run into one or two that may be to inform, maybe persuade, but for today's purpose, it's going to be to inform. So you're going to be reading a piece of literature from the Diary of Anne Frank. It's nonfiction, but it's also telling a story, isn't it? You're going to read the secret annex paragraphs. I believe there's 4 or 5. And I want you to answer the 2 questions that come at the end. And here's the questions. Which of the following is not the main idea of the article? And you're going to get 3 choices. What happened to Otto Frank's business during World War II? Life in the Secret Annex? Or about the book, The Secret Annex by Anne Frank? So, which one of those is not the main idea of this article? And question 2, summarize the article. It's not a question so much as a statement. So what you need to do, guys, is number 2, give me 5 sentences summarizing the article. Okay? And number 1 is just multiple choice. So remember, that's all you're doing. Summarizing and figuring out the central idea of the piece. Why the author wrote something. You got to read 5 paragraphs of something and then pull one idea out. Give the overall idea. Remember, persuade, inform, entertain. This one's easy. It's an inform, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be at the Google Meet, 1:30 to 2. Let's go ahead now and go over the Pigman questions. Chapter 7 from the Pigman. This is last Friday's homework. How did Mr. Pignotti show his affection for John and Lorraine? Well, we know that Mr. Pignotti is a super nice guy. Lonely, but nice. And he is shown a couple of different ways in which he's affectionate for John and Lorraine. He buys them sort of like souvenirs and food at the zoo. He invites them to the zoo without barely having know anything about them. And he's sharing personal bits of his life with them. And he's sharing things that none of their kids are knowing as he's going on. Where do all the kids go to drink? Masterson's tomb. It's an old graveyard. Well, it's a graveyard, part of the graveyard, and towards the back it's a Masterson's family plot, meaning all the family members get buried in this one plot of land. And they find the old tombstone area in the back, and there's a little mausoleum, and they all sit on top of it, and they drink beer, and they smoke cigarettes. How does John feel about cemeteries, death, life, and himself? John likes cemeteries. He likes to think about death. He likes to think about life, but more so, he kind of is in the in-between. He likes to wonder, what is all this about? He goes to the graveyard, he sees the graves on the ground, he says, wonder what person under theirs story was. I wonder where they're at. Is this it? Is there a heaven? John's questioning all these things. That's why he likes graveyards, he says. It kind of scares him, but also inspires him. Why does Bohr tell John, try to eat your imagination when you're hungry sometime? We saw last Friday that Bohr, that's John's father, and John do not get along. At dinner one night, they get into a discussion about what John needs to do for his life. And his father says he needs to work at the stock exchange like he does. He works in the stock market selling coffee stocks. And his brother Kenneth also does this. And John tells his father he wants to be an actor, that he has a great imagination and he'd be good at that. And his father takes a shot at John and says the imagination won't pay the bills. That's what that means. What does John call his mother and why? He calls his mother sort of an anxious mess. And he always says, there goes anxious, or something along those lines. And every time they argue, he and his father get into like a serious discussion. The mom beats it out of there because it makes her anxious to see them. She doesn't like confrontation. How does John feel about going to visit Mr. Pignotti? He likes it. And more so, he likes it because he wants to find a way to kind of talk to someone else talk to another adult that's not his mom and dad. He feels like Mr. Pignotti actually listens to him and doesn't judge him or doesn't do things the way his father does. What service did Silver Lake provide? How much did it cost? We saw at the very end of chapter 7 that Mr. Pignotti's wife is actually not in Florida visiting. She's actually dead. And at the very end of the chapter, we see the Silver Lake funeral director's authorization of services here. And at the very, very bottom, it said her funeral cost $1,321.06. And that she had died some time ago. Okay, let's move on, shall we then? This new information that we've learned about Mr. Pignotti sort of opens up a whole new light to him, a very lonely light, that we get to kind of understand why he's so lonely and why he wants attention and he likes talking to Lorraine and John, is the fact his wife has passed away some time ago. And it's very sad to hear this. And the kids in chapter 8 they find this by mistake when they're going through his things and in his house. He kind of lets them explore his house and they're kind of asking each other how to deal with it. So let's go ahead and read this chapter. It's from Lorraine's point of view. So as we know, whenever a chapter is from Lorraine's point of view, it's much more introspective. It's much more, she thinks about things a lot more. John, on the other hand, is very abrupt. He's very impulsive. He just does things. He doesn't think. But Lorraine's chapters, I hope you're picking this up, she's very insightful as a first-person narrator. She thinks about things. She's sensitive. Chapter 8. And I'll read as much as I can into this, and then I'm going to let you guys finish it up. It stops on page 103, so it goes from 86 to 103. Here we go. "His wife's dead," John whispered. "What?" I just found her funeral bill." A terrible chill ran through me when he said that, because I had been afraid Conchetta, his wife, was not away on vacation. I didn't exactly suspect Mr. Pignotti of having murdered her or sealed her body behind a wall in some cellar, but I was suspicious. There was something about the glaze in John's eyes, though, when he laughed, that disturbed me. We could tell Mr. Pignotti didn't really believe his own laughter. It was a nervous type of laugh, and the same kind as that of a landlady we once had after her husband died in a dentist's chair while he was under the gas. "Hey kids, did you see the ad in yesterday's paper?" Mr. Pignotti asked us, finally coming back with more red wine. "No?" "Well, here it is. It says, 'For sale, complete set of encyclopedias. Never used. Wife knows everything.'" And then he left out that laugh again. I just couldn't smile at his jokes anymore, though. I thought it was sad. I mean, that cute little girl in the ruffled dress had already grown up, gotten married, lived her life, and was buried under the ground somewhere. Mr. Pignotti wasn't even able to admit that. The landlady used to think her husband was going to come back one day too, but she died less than 2 months after him. I've always wondered about those cases where a man and a wife die within a short time of each other. Sometimes it's only days. It makes me think that the love between a man and a woman must be the strongest thing in the world. But then look at my father and mother. Although maybe they didn't really love each other. Maybe that's why the way she is. I found this upstairs, John whispered, holding a small plastic card. "What is it?" The pig man explained what a credit card was. "You mean you just sign your name and then some department store just lets you take whatever you want? You don't have to pay it for months?" John asked, completely wide-eyed. Mr. Pignotti said he only got the card so his wife could go shopping in the fancy food area they've got at the department store. She loves all their delicacies, he said. And I remember the taste of the skingili. When I got home that night, I thought of them again, but another thought struck me. I realized how many things the pigman and his wife must have shared. Even the fun of preparing food. And good food is supposed to produce good conversation, I've heard. I guess no wonder my mother and I have never had much of a conversation when all we eat is canned soup, chop suey and instant coffee. I think I would have learned how to cook if she ever encouraged me, but one time I tried baking a cake, she said it tasted so horrible and was a complete waste of money. Did you fix my coffee, Lorraine? Yes, Mother. This new one I've got at work has sex on the brain, let me tell you. He only's got a couple of months to live and he's still got little itchy fingers. I watched my mother powdering her nose at the kitchen table. She leaned forward between sips of coffee and dabbed at her face. You know, that last nurse of his quit because she couldn't control his hands. You know, he's always trying to touch something. But I put a stop to that the first time he tried something on me. Can I make you some eggs, Mother? Don't bother, Lorraine. I'll have breakfast at their house. His wife is treating me with kid gloves because they know a nurse isn't easy to come by. Particularly when they gotta put up with I gotta put up with. Make yourself something, Lorraine. No thanks, I'm not hungry. Make sure you scrub the kitchen floor today, okay, honey? In fact, I'd concentrate on the entire kitchen. It's worse than anything else. We're out of cleanser, Mom. Shall I buy a can today? Wait and let me see if I can take one from the job. I think I saw some when I was going through the closets yesterday. She tucked herself in the bathroom mirror and headed for the door. All right, give me a kiss, Lorraine. Lock the doors and windows and don't you open that door for anyone. You hear me? Yes, Mother. If a salesman rings that bell, don't you answer it, Lorraine. I watched her waiting on the corner until the bus came. If I strained my neck, I could always catch a glimpse of her standing there in her nurse's uniform, white shoes. She usually wore a navy blue jacket, which sort of looked strange over that white. And as I watched her, I remembered all the times that she said how hard it was for her to be a nurse, how bad it was for her legs, how painful her varicose veins were that nurses always got from being on their feet so much. I could see her standing under the streetlight until the bus came. It was so easy for me to feel sorry for my mom, to see her how awful her life was, even to understand just a little why she picked on me the way she did. I hadn't always been like that, though. But she did pick on me now. Lots of times I'd cry myself to sleep, but more and more I felt myself thinking of Mr. Pignotti whenever I felt sad. Sometimes just after I put the light out, I'd see his smiling face on gleaming and as he offered me a snack. Some little detail I thought I'd forgotten. I wish my mother were more like him. I wish she knew how to have a little fun for a change. I got most of my housework done and plenty of time for me and John to go meet Mr. Pignotti down at the Staten Island Ferry House by 11:30 that morning. Mr. Pignotti said he'd meet us there after he'd stopped at the zoo to feed Bobo, which was fine with John. He loves to wait for people in the ferry house because all the bums and drunks always come over. John likes to drive them crazy. They've got drunks and bums all over that Staten Island Ferry House, but not half as many as they got on the other side of the South Ferry. John makes them tell their whole life story before he'll give them any money. This one guy came over to John and said his name was Dixie. Everybody called him Dixie because he came from the South. And then he told us this story about how he used to be a professor at Southern Pines University. But he took some LSD as part of an experimental program, and well, he lost his power of concentration. His whole academic life had come to an end because he'd lost his power of concentration. I thought about writing a story about him until John told me that same homeless man came up to him about a month ago and said his name was Confederate. He said they called him that because he was from the South. John said he told an entirely different story about how he'd been taking speed reading courses and he was reading faster than anybody in the whole world. He said he used to read so fast he had to buy 2 copies of every book and cut the pages out and put them on tables around the room. And then he'd run by the pages. That's how fast he could read, he said. He said he was written up in Scientific American magazine in the January 1949 issue, and anyone could go read it if they wanted. He was supposed to have a sister in Marlborough, Vermont, who could do the same thing, and then the tragedy was supposed to have happened. He was running around the room so fast reading that he banged into a table and lost his power. Concentration. Mr. Pignotti got there in time for us to get the 11:45 boat to Manhattan. I just had to go along on the trip to the department store because John absolutely has no control over himself anymore. If I'd let him and Mr. Pignotti go along, John would have charged half of that store on Mr. Pignotti's credit card. He wouldn't have done it to be mean, he just isn't used to people giving him stuff. And that's what Mr. Pignotti just wants to do. When the ferry docked on the other side, we got off on the deck and we meant to go walking down this long curving ramp that looks like a poor man's Guggenheim Museum. The subway station is right there, so we went down to the 7th Local Avenue. When you take the 7th, you have to switch at Chambers Street. It really can get boring unless your eyes are open. Then one woman at Chambers Street was talking to herself a mile a minute. I don't even know. Was it another omen? She was screaming, "Death is coming," she kept saying. "God told me death is coming. He calls me his little chatty doll. God's little chatty doll." It's sort of spooky how when you're caught talking to God nowadays, everyone thinks you're nuts. You know, they used to call you a prophet back in those days. We couldn't get the 34th Street quick enough. And just as we came up with the subway, there was the department store. Mr. Pignotti started getting excited when we get inside. All those Saturday shoppers, you could tell right off he was going to show us around like he owned the place. He took us right up to the food store on the 8th floor. It was probably the only part of the department store he'd ever been to. And I just couldn't picture. I could just picture Conchetta and him pushing the cart up and down the aisle and picking out the vile food together. "Wait until you try these frog's legs," he said happily. "And they've got ricotta cheese." I started feeling sick. He also picked up 3 jars of bean soup, bamboo shoots, fish killies with their heads still on, and a lot of other delicious items. The killies are the tastiest in the bean soup. I guess he and Conchetta really liked the same things. "All right, kids, I want you to pick out some things you'd like to try." He smiled at me. John had already picked out a carton of tiger's milk and a box of chocolate-covered ants. Ugh, anything to be weird. "Please," Mr. Pignotti insisted. Just then my eye caught a 2-pound can of Lovin' Nuts, which is a mixture of pecans, almonds, and popcorn. Right next to it was another large container of jamboree juicy jelly beans. And before I knew what happened, Mr. Pignotti grabbed them and put them into the cart. "Mr. Pignotti, I really don't want you spending all that money on us," I tried to tell him. "Nonsense," he insisted. But I really didn't. Still, it felt kind of good. I mean, no one had ever bought me stuff like this before. Something, well, I just liked and didn't need and didn't even ask for. And now I knew John felt the same way because I felt the same way. After we finished with the delicatessen department, we all went to the 5th floor. We had to cut through the women's underwear to get to the toy department. "Hiya, doll," John said to one of the mannequins that was wearing only a girdle and a brassiere. "Can I help you, sir?" A saleslady with too much makeup on and an enormous beehive hairstyle wanted to ask us. I don't think so," I said. "Nothing for your daughter?" she asked Mr. Pignotti. He started to smile. "I'm not his daughter," I blurted out, and Mr. Pignotti got this sad, depressed look on his face. I didn't mean to say it as though I would be ashamed to be his daughter, but I guess that's just the way it came out. I'm his niece," I quickly offered, returning the smile to his face. Is there anything you'd like to buy here?" Mr. Pignotti asked me, and I knew he meant it. I had no intention of accepting anything more, but I couldn't help looking around. "No, nothing, thank you." "We have some lovely nylon stockings that are on sale," the saleslady said, with just a tone to make me embarrassed if I didn't say yes. "Go ahead," Mr. Pignotti urged. "Please." "All right, I'll take a pair," I mumbled, and I'm sure my face was red. "They come in 3-pair packages." "We'll take all 3 pairs, the pigman insisted. "What size, please?" 11? 11. "Yes, ma'am. 11, I repeated. "You couldn't be more than a size 7.5, young lady." "I want a size 11, thank you." "But size 11. I began to get terrified of what my mother would say when I brought her home 3 brand new pairs of stockings. I'd have to tell her some girl at school brought them by mistake and wanted to sell them cheap or something like that. I started laughing. "Is something funny?" the saleslady asked, putting her hand to her beehive. "Oh no," as I watched John slip a lit cigarette in the hand of one of the mannequins with the girdle and the brassiere. The visit to the toy store department was something else. I hadn't been to their toy department in years, not since I was around 3, and my mom used to take me to sit on Santa's lap. It was fun, but now everything was made of cheap plastic. and you could tell the stuff would break in a minute. The one thing that really got my goat, though, was these ships and bottles. There's all these little ships and bottles, but the bottles are made of plastic. So they had bottoms you could tell them open the bottle up and take the ship out whenever you felt like it. But, I mean, they lost the whole point of having a ship in a bottle. You're supposed to wonder how the thing got in there. Not able to screw the bottom off the thing and take the ship out whenever you felt like it. And then there was the arsenal of guns and toy pistols, slingshots, toy swords, and knives. It's no wonder kids grow up to be killers with all the rehearsal toy stores give them. There was enough artillery in that toy store to wipe out Red China and the Mau tribe of Africa. And I personally think some of the toy manufacturers could use a good course in preventative psychiatry. Can we have a look at the pet shop? Mr. Pigman asked. All right, I'm going to stop there. So these kids are, again, I hope you're picking this up too. The kids are really, they've never had anyone take, like, any time with them like this. John's parents, they're not interested. John's too difficult for them, and they just rather, ignore him. And Lorraine's mom's too busy working, a single mom. So Mr. Pignotti has stepped in where their parents haven't, and he's showing them and doing things for them they've never had before, so they can't help but indulge. But are they indulging too much? Are they taking it too far? I think that's the question to keep asking yourself. See you guys at the chat, 1:30 to 2, if you need extra help. Talk to you later.